We had in the book, there's a story of a medical serial killer. Um, his name is Michael Swango. After Michael Swango murdered patients, he would love to call up the families and in great detail, go over Dad's last 30 minutes on Earth. How he was in pain, how he suffered. Oh, how I tried to save him, which was bull. All right. It wasn't even enough excitement to murder. Had to have that second bite of the apple, whether it be Swango or Gilbert or Lucy Letby or other serial killers throughout the world. And that it's like pouring water on a drowning man. It is unbelievable, but it's very, very true. And this happens more often than we like to even admit.
Yeah. Over what period of years was Swango killing? Because I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Well,
I know.
Swango was in the 90s and he was actually convicted in 2000. And if you'd like, I could tell you a little bit about Swango and his background.
Please.
Okay. Well, my personal favorite of all my medical serial killers is Michael Swango. You know, when Michael Swango was in medical school, his fellow students referred to him as Double O Swango, licensed to kill, because they actually thought that he was harming patients as a student. And they went to the dean of the medical school with their concerns, and the dean said, "What the hell do you know? You're only students. I'm the dean. He's not harming anybody intentionally. You know what? He needs some more training. That's all. He needs some more training. So we'll keep him for about 6 months." And he graduated and became a doctor. And he went to Ohio State Medical Center in the state of Ohio in the United States, really excellent medical center. And of course, some patients started to expire unexpectedly, including this one young girl who was a gymnast. Her name was Cynthia McGee. She got in a car accident with another student and was improving until she got a visit from Dr. Swango. Then she died unexpectedly, but Swango didn't get charged with that. You see, the student who hit her with his car, he got charged with vehicular homicide, but he didn't kill Cynthia McGee. Swango killed Cynthia McGee. Well, they did an investigation, but they couldn't prove anything. Very hard to prove. Very, very hard to prove. I know they tried. Very hard to prove. But they wouldn't renew his contract there, so he went back home and he became an EMT, emergency medical technician, because he loved accidents and multiple deaths and pulling up on scenes and all that excitement. And he did really well. The EMTs were actually happy to have a doctor, as an EMT. And one day he invites his coworkers and he says, "Hey, come on in, guys. You work so hard. I went out and I bought some donuts for you. Have a donut." So it's the end of the shift. They have some donuts. They go home and they're all deathly ill. Deathly ill. And Swango's calling him up. Remember that second bite of the apple? He's calling him up. And he's saying, "Tell me all your symptoms. Tell me what you were throwing up. Do you have fever? Did you turn colors?" He wants to hear all about his work. He wants that second bite of the apple. Well, about 2 weeks later, and these EMTs weren't stupid, about 2 weeks later, he comes in with some iced tea. And he says, "Hi, fellas, I got some iced tea for you." So they said, "We'll just leave it over there, Mike. We'll take it later." And they have it tested, and it's loaded with arsenic, just as the donuts were sprinkled with arsenic. And they call the cops. The cops do an excellent investigation, and he gets 3 years in jail for poisoning his coworkers. Now, I didn't think in the United States of America you could get 3 years in jail, come out and be a physician again. But boy, I was wrong. Being a sociopath, he was a very charming guy, a handsome guy, kind of looked like a movie star. A handsome guy, very charming. And he started fabricating documents and saying that he was in a barroom brawl and his civil rights were restored by the governor of the state. All baloney. And he gets a job as a physician on the West Coast of the United States. And everything's going well. He's doing a good job. And he meets this nurse and they get engaged. Her name was Kristen Kinney. Just a beautiful, lovely, lovely girl. And all of a sudden, he applies for a membership in the American Medical Association, which was his big mistake because they did a background investigation, found out that he had spent time in prison for poisoning his coworkers. So he lost his job, and his fiancée is just beside herself. She can't really handle it. She goes home across country back to Virginia, and she sees mom and dad, and she says, I really love this guy, Michael Swango, and I thought we were going to have a great future together, but I can't be with him now after what I heard. But Mom, when I was living with him, I was getting these headaches. But now that I'm home, I seem to be better. And she is better until all of a sudden, one day the doorbell rings, and it's Mr. Handsome and Charming, and he charms his way back into her life. And the headaches start again. And then one day she goes to the park. She says, I can't take this anymore. Takes out a gun and kills herself. Blows her brains out. Well, you can't blame Swango for that one, can you? Well, actually, you can, because even though the family had the body cremated, we tested a lock of her hair and it was loaded with arsenic. Yeah, Swango was actually poisoning even his own fiancée. Well, to make a long story short, he winds up eventually in my neighborhood in Long Island. And he got a residency in Stony Brook Medical Center on Long Island, which has a teaching arrangement with the VA hospital. And he gets a residency in psychiatry. That meant he had to go in front of a board of trained psychiatrists and convince them that he should be in the program. So if he could fool a board of trained psychiatrists, who the hell can he fool? Oh, one day I'm sitting at my desk in the Inspector General's office, and I get a phone call from the chief of psychiatry at the Northport VA, and she says, hey, Bruce, you're not going to believe this. We have a doctor working here who spent time in prison for poisoning people. I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe it was an April Fool's joke. Maybe she's playing games with me or something. She said, no, I'm serious. And I did some research, and I found out. I said, I got to meet this guy. So I get in the car, I grab one of my special agents, and we go out to the Northport, Long Island VA Medical Center, and there he is. He's in the dorm. Look like he just came out off the golf course. Well tan, so smooth, so charming. You know what, Tyson? If I didn't know better, if my daughter brought him home, I'd say, wow, this guy's a doctor at the Veterans Hospital. Welcome to the family. When's the wedding? You know what? He would fool anybody. So he starts giving me this barroom brawl story again, and I said, oh, thank you very much, doctor. I really appreciate it. But while I'm here in your room, can I look around a little bit? And he wouldn't let me. And he made me leave. And the next thing you know, he winds up in Zimbabwe, Africa, because of a shortage of doctors. And when he's in Zimbabwe, Africa, he kills women and children and pregnant women. And he had to return to the United States because it was time for him to renew his passport. And that's when we arrested him, but not for murder. We didn't have any evidence that he murdered anybody. All right. We arrested him for every federal agent's favorite crime, lying to the government. If you lie to a federal agent, if you lie to the government, that's a felony. And he got 3 years in jail for lying to me, which I felt really good about at the time, but I knew that it wasn't enough. So what the hell do we do now? And this is how I learned, because I had never done a case like this before, to do these kind of investigations. So we put together that team that I had spoken about. And the next thing we had to do is we had to go to the cemetery and exhume bodies. Now, I had never done anything like this before. Right. And we had to go to the families and ask the families for permission to exhume the bodies. And the families were great. Sometimes they wanted to be there. They actually wanted to be there at the cemetery when we exhumed the bodies. And then I find myself at the morgue. This is a real cultural experience for somebody who has never done this. And the bodies are open and, the organs are out there. Didn't bother me, but it bothered us. Not everybody could handle it. And the pathologist says to me, Bruce, you see this heart over here? I said, yeah. He says, there's nothing wrong with this heart. This person didn't die from heart disease. This person died from something else. And that's when the forensic toxicology came in. And they made the determination that these patients, and we had selected 6 of the best cases we could find, they made a determination that these patients were poisoned with either epinephrine, just like what Kristen Gilbert used, or something called succinylcholine. In the hospital, they call it sucks, where they put a tube down you. These are 2 of the very common murder weapons my medical serial killers use. Well, now Swango thinks he's about to get out of prison, hop on a plane, and go back to Africa. Well, not so fast, buddy. Because at the same time, fortunately, the United States entered into an extradition treaty with the government of Zimbabwe, and they were dying to get this guy back. Oh, were they dying to get him back. So we said to Swango, hey, look, Doc, if we go to trial, and even if we lose, we're just going to put you on the plane and drop you off on the tarmac in Zimbabwe. Good luck, buddy. So he decided to plead guilty. And he pled guilty, and he admitted to using a paralytic. He didn't actually identify what the drug was. He admitted to using a paralytic to kill people. And he got sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Then later, he actually pled guilty to killing that Cynthia McGee, that student in Ohio State, and all the charges were dropped against the other student. But how many people did he kill? These killers kill so many people, they can't even remember themselves. They can't even remember who all their victims were. Look, if you kill 60, 100 people, are you going to remember all of them? Bad chances are you don't.